Welcome back to Capturing History, where we explore the intersections of photography and the Civil War. I'm your host, David, and today we're diving into how the camera lens shaped our understanding of one of the most significant periods in American history. The Civil War was a conflict of profound consequence, which happened to reshape the nation's identity and marked a critical turning point in the evolution of warfare. But among the chaos and devastation, a new approach emerged: photography. Joining me today is Jameer Evans, a photography historian and expert on the visual documentation of the Civil War. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Photography played a crucial role in shaping public perception of the war. It brought the grim realities of battlefields, camp life, and the human cost of war directly to the public for the first time.
So, would you say there's a rough estimate of how many photos were taken in the Civil War?
There were millions of Civil War portraits, but only around 10K documentary photos were taken.
And would you say that combat photography began the Civil War?
Yes, most historians agree that combat photography was born during the Civil War.
So, what were some of the technical challenges photographers faced during this time?
So photography in the 1860s was a time-consuming process. Cameras were large and bulky and required delicate handling in unforgiving conditions.
All right, let's talk about today's sponsors.
Looking for a quality podcast to check out? Look up the Project Podcast on Spotify. Join me, Connor Lewis, as I interview all sorts of different athletes in this laid-back, interview-focused podcast. We interview a range of different athletes from different backgrounds, discussing their life, their growth, and how they got to where they are today. The Project Podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes. Check it out on Spotify today.
This episode is brought to you by BJ Sports Media. I use BJ Sports Media. They are a great photography company. They are based out of Rhode Island. They're high school students. They're great at what they do. They're affordable, only about $25 for a single shoot. They do great work. If you're interested in an athletic photographer or just any sort of photographer, please hit them up on Instagram at BJ Sports Media.
Jameer, can you tell me a little bit about the wet plate photographic process?
Sure, the wet plate collodion process, which happened to be the most common method of producing images at the time, is a process of coating a tin plate or a glass plate in a light-sensitive material and then exposing it to create a photograph. This required photographers to carry portable darkrooms into the fields and work quickly before the photographic plate dried.
Despite these challenges, photographers produced some iconic images. Can you walk us through a few examples of where this was shown?
The images may be blurred for the safety of the listeners. Can you display the images? And 100%. One of the most famous images from the Civil War is Alexander Gardner's The Home of a Rebel Sharpshooter, which depicts a Confederate soldier lying dead behind a stone wall at the Battle of Gettysburg. Another iconic image is Matthew Brady's portrait of Abraham Lincoln, which helped to shape the public's perception of the president during a pivotal moment in history. In my opinion, the most famous and important image was Timothy O'Sullivan's A Harvest of Death, which depicts fallen soldiers and the harsh realities of war. Alexander Gardner described the soldiers as dishonoring Confederate troops who paid their treason with their lives, dying a lonely battlefield death, buried by strangers in graves far from home versus what the author intended it to be.
Wow, how long did it take you to learn all this information?
Well, it took me 7 years to learn all this information, and I studied at LaSalle University, where I majored in U.S. history.
Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll dive into more facts and show a video.
If you would like to skip the break and enjoy more of the podcast, the timestamp to begin is at 5:45. First off, I wanted to show 2 clips from one video and then play an additional video to watch.
In this photograph, a runaway slave named Gordon poses for his picture in a tent somewhere near Baton Rouge, and it was immediately sent north and east, and it became one of the first pictures of an actual slave with whip marks on his back. And the facts of the picture allowed people to see something that they'd only read about. The photograph's made by a surgeon at a hospital in Washington. The Harewood Hospital was headed by a guy named Reed Brockway Bonteque. He believed that by photographing his patients, he could create a photographic record that would help us understand the brutality of war and the beautiful science of medicine.
Here's the second video.
Welcome to the Museum of Artifacts That Made America, a snapshot of how the camera came of age during the Civil War. When French artist Louis Daguerre demonstrated practical photography in 1839, it changed how we view history forever. In the decades that followed, the daguerreotype was replaced by new technologies, like the wet plate process. Photographs became clearer and easier to reproduce, and America fell in love. By 1860, hundreds of photographers operated in studios across the country, using their cameras to take formal portraits of Americans from all walks of life. But the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 inspired them to document history itself. Many Civil War battles took place near major cities. Photographers could pack up their equipment and travel to the front lines. There, they produced countless images, which were quickly shared around the country, exposing the American public and the world to the horrors of war, in many cases, for the very first time. Because of the scarcity of photochemicals in the South, most Civil War photographers were Northerners, like Matthew Brady and Alexander Gardner. But some Southerners did take to the field, including James M. Osborne and F.E. Durbeck, using their cameras to capture many aspects of the conflict, from wagons to camps, hospitals to landscapes, and of course, the aftermath of battle. Their images literally changed the way people saw the Civil War, rendering some people less enthusiastic about the war, and others more resolute, to ensure that the collective sacrifice would not be in vain.
So, are any of these photos still valuable today?
Yeah, due to the Civil War being the first large war to be photographed, they are still treasured. In 1874, a collection for $27,840. In today's money, this would be around $750,000, so you can see how valuable they clearly are.
And how did photographers navigate the ethical and moral considerations of documenting such a harrowing conflict?
This is actually a complex issue. On one hand, photographers felt a duty to document the realities of war and bring them to the public attention. But on the other hand, they had to struggle with questions of exploitation. Some critics accused photographers of sensationalizing the war for commercial gain, while others praised them for their bravery and commitment to truth-telling.
So how else do you think Civil War photography affected society?
Personally, I think that it brought more awareness to the movement and it showed people the actual true horrors of the war.
And were multiple types of photos taken or just one?
Yeah, actually there were multiple types of photos taken. Officers would take portraits to give to their troops. They also had carte de visite, or CDV, which were portrait photos also used as trading cards.
And outside of this, would you say the war advanced any sort of sciences?
Yeah, I think that the Civil War helped advance medicine. William H. Bell was famous for documenting wartime diseases and bringing attention to the public. The public seeing these gruesome diseases pushed us to pursue better medicine.
Thank you, Jameer, for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a fascinating discussion.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Wait, I have one more joke before you go. Why did the camera go to therapy?
I have no clue.
to develop a positive image of itself. Not funny, no.
Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Capturing History. Join us next time as we continue to explore how photography has shaped our understanding of the world around us. Until then, keep capturing those moments that matter. Goodbye for now, from David and Jameer.